My name is Audrey Walker. For 30 years, my family treated my quiet nature as weakness. They built their entire lives on fake appearances, credit card debt, and the assumption that whenever reality caught up to them, I would step in and pay for their mistakes. So when my sister demanded an outrageous, top-tier luxury wedding to impress her elite in-laws, my parents expected me to hand over my life savings without hesitation. I didn't fight them. I didn't even raise my voice. Instead, I smiled, agreed to help, and took complete control of the planning. What they didn't realize until the orchestra stopped playing and the venue managers stepped forward with the final invoices was that I hadn't spent a single penny of my own money. I simply stepped out the back door, turned off my phone, and let the legal system handle the rest. Real revenge isn't loud. It's letting arrogant people sign their own financial ruin while you walk away completely clean. Before I tell you how the long game was played, take a second to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And while you're down in the comments, let me know, where are you tuning in from today and what time is it where you are right now? Now, let's go back to the evening they thought they had me trapped. Growing up in the Walker household meant learning one fundamental rule early on. My sister Rachel was the sun, and the rest of us were just supposed to rotate around her light. I spent 24 years feeling completely invisible under my own parents' roof. My father, Richard, and my mother, Evelyn, never made a secret of who mattered most. Rachel was their golden child, the eldest, the prettiest, and the one destined for greatness in their eyes. I was simply the extra mouth to feed, an afterthought, left to figure life out on my own. I remember the evening I turned 16. I had spent weeks studying for my driver's license exam and passed with a perfect score on my birthday. I walked into the kitchen, holding the certificate proudly, hoping for a simple moment of recognition. Instead, my mother barely glanced up from the kitchen table where she was ironing Rachel's dress. She said, "Audrey, put that paper away. Your sister has her high school prom fitting in 20 minutes, and we need to make sure her hair looks right." My father didn't even turn his head away from the television screen. "Congratulations, kid," he muttered coldly. "Now go grab the shopping bags from the trunk." That single moment summarized my entire childhood. If Rachel got an average grade on a high school quiz, my parents took her out for steak dinners to celebrate her effort. When I graduated from high school with honors, my father gave me a quick handshake and asked if I could drive Rachel to her friend's house on the way home. It was a deliberate, everyday reminder that my achievements meant nothing compared to Rachel's mere existence. Rachel learned to play her role perfectly. She was entitled, manipulative, and fully aware of her protected status. She treated me like a personal assistant rather than a sister. Whenever I tried to stand up for myself or set basic boundaries, my mother stepped in immediately to shut me down. "She's your older sister, Audrey," Evelyn would say, crossing her arms with that sharp, defensive tone she reserved strictly for me. "Stop being so jealous and start making yourself useful around here." For a long time, I wondered what was wrong with me. I spent my early years trying to earn their approval, working twice as hard in school and keeping my head down. But by the time I turned 18, the cold reality finally settled in. I wasn't the problem. My parents were self-absorbed people who needed a favorite child to boost their own egos, and they needed a quiet scapegoat to take the blame whenever things went wrong. Crying about it wasn't going to fix anything. Emotional breakdowns didn't get me respect in that house. They just gave my family another reason to label me as difficult. So I stopped begging for a seat at their table. I chose to play the long game instead. I made a silent vow to build my own life quietly, brick by brick, without relying on a single dime or a single encouraging word from any of them. I let Rachel soak up all the praise, while I focused on surviving, learning, and securing my own financial independence. I realized early on that true power didn't come from throwing tantrums or making loud demands. True power came from emotional control and patience. I let them believe I was quiet because I was defeated. I let them think I had accepted my role as the family ghost. But in reality, I was just observing, taking notes, and waiting for the right moment to step out of their shadow for good. After high school, I put myself through college, working late shifts and taking on freelance marketing gigs. I didn't ask my parents for a single dollar, because I knew every cent from them would come with attached strings and constant reminders of my obligation to Rachel. Instead, I put my head down, mastered digital marketing, and climbed the corporate ladder fast. By 27, I had earned a promotion to digital marketing manager at a top-tier firm in the city. I was financially secure, completely debt-free, and building a life on my own terms. My biggest milestone came when I saved enough for a substantial down payment on my own downtown condominium. It was a sleek, modern 2-bedroom property with city views, a tangible proof of my hard work and independence. I felt a rare spark of pride, so I invited my parents and Rachel over for Sunday dinner to share the news. I showed them around the space, pointing out the hardwood floors and the spacious balcony. I handed my mother the bottle of wine I had bought to celebrate. Evelyn took a small sip, looked around the kitchen counter, and sniffed dismissively. "It's a bit small, don't you think? And the mortgage payments must be absurd for a single woman. You really should be saving your money instead of showing off, Audrey." My father didn't even bother taking off his coat. "Buying property in this economy is a gamble, kid. Your sister is looking for a place in the suburbs, and she'll actually have a family to fill it." Rachel just smirked into her phone, barely acknowledging the tour. They stayed for less than 20 minutes before leaving. No congratulations, no pride, just cold indifference. I didn't let the reaction crush me. In fact, it solidified my resolve. I realized then that no amount of success would ever grant me a place in their hearts, and I made peace with that reality. But just 2 months later, the family dynamic shifted into overdrive. Rachel announced she was dating Jason Blackwell, the son of a prominent real estate developer in our region. Jason came from old money, wore designer suits, and drove a luxury sports car. For my parents, Jason was the ultimate lottery ticket, a gateway to the high society lifestyle they had always craved. Within 6 months of dating, Jason proposed to Rachel with a massive diamond ring. The moment Rachel posted the engagement photo online, my parents went wild. Evelyn called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice practically trembling with artificial excitement. "Audrey, Jason gave Rachel a 3-carat ring. His family is hosting an engagement dinner at the private country club this Friday. Make sure you dress appropriately. We can't have you embarrassing us in front of the Blackwells." At the engagement dinner, my parents treated Jason like royalty and paraded Rachel around like a trophy. My condominium purchase was completely erased from history, while Rachel's engagement was celebrated as if she had personally negotiated world peace. I sat at the edge of the long dining table, sipping my drink, watching my parents fawn over Jason's wealth. Rachel leaned across the table toward me with a smug smile. "Isn't it amazing, Audrey? Some people have to work themselves to the bone, while others are just born for the finer things." I looked her dead in the eye, smiled smoothly, and said, "I'm genuinely happy you found someone willing to pay for your lifestyle, Rachel." She frowned, but before she could reply, my mother tapped her glass to make a toast to the perfect couple. I took a slow sip of my wine, watching them carefully. The foundation of their world was built on greed and vanity, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. 3 weeks after the engagement dinner, reality hit my parents like a freight train. The Blackwells were high society people, and they expected a wedding that matched their social standing. Word had already spread among Jason's elite circle about the upcoming nuptials, and the pressure on my parents was mounting fast. Rachel, naturally, was eager to play the part of a wealthy bride. She demanded a luxury venue, custom designer gowns, high-end caterers, and 5-star entertainment. But there was a major problem. My parents didn't have that kind of money. Richard had been working a mid-level sales job for 20 years, and Evelyn hadn't worked a day in her life. They had built their entire lifestyle on appearances, empty pride, and credit card debt. When the initial quotes from wedding planners started rolling in, panic set in. Rather than scaling back Rachel's extravagant demands, my mother called a family emergency meeting at their house. I knew why I was being summoned. I walked in, poured myself a glass of tap water, and sat down at the dining table. Evelyn didn't even bother with small talk. She pushed a stack of venue brochures toward me with a stressed look on her face. "Audrey, we have a serious issue," Evelyn began, her voice tight with artificial urgency. "Rachel's wedding needs to be top tier. Jason's family is inviting major business executives, and we can't look poor. But the deposits alone are way beyond what your father and I can cover right now." I looked at the venue pamphlets, luxury country clubs and waterfront estates. I raised an eyebrow and said, "So scale a gown, have a nice backyard ceremony." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Don't be ridiculous, Audrey. This is your sister's one big day. You have a cushy corporate job and you bought that fancy condo. It's time you step up and contribute to this family." Rachel walked into the dining room, holding a binder full of luxury wedding ideas. "You don't have a family to support, Audrey," she sneered, looking at me with total entitlement. "You can easily afford to cover the wedding costs for me. It's the least you can do after years of being so distant." A few years ago, those words would have made my blood boil. But looking at the three of them sitting there, demanding my hard-earned money while looking down on me, I felt nothing but a cold, clear clarity. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as an open checkbook. For years, they had taken my quiet nature for weakness. They assumed I would cave under pressure just to earn a crumb of their acceptance. But as I looked at my mother's expectant face and my sister's arrogant smirk, I realized something empowering. Their greed was their ultimate vulnerability. That was the exact moment I decided to give them everything they wanted. I tilted my head, putting on a mild, reflective expression. "You're right," I said smoothly, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "Rachel deserves a dream wedding, and I want to make sure the Blackwells are truly impressed. I'll cover the expenses." Evelyn's jaw dropped slightly, and Rachel gasped, her eyes lighting up with greed. "You will?" Rachel asked, suddenly dropping her hostile attitude. "Yes," I replied, maintaining a quiet, confident posture. "I'll handle the coordination with all the top-tier vendors myself, so you don't have to stress about the details. I want this to be the grandest event this family has ever seen." My father let out a sigh of relief and smiled for the first time in months. "Now that's what I call being a team player, kid," he said. I smiled back, a calm, calculated smile that masked the trap I had just laid. They thought they had successfully manipulated me into funding their fake elite lifestyle. They had no idea. They had just handed me total control over their financial ruin. The very next morning, I went to work, setting up appointments with the most exclusive wedding vendors in the state. If my family wanted a grand spectacle to impress the Blackwells, I was going to give them a multi-$100,000 nightmare. Over the next 3 weeks, I scheduled high-level consultations with luxury estate managers, celebrity floral designers, Michelin star caterers, and elite entertainment agencies. I made sure every single choice pushed the absolute boundaries of extreme luxury and extravagance. I brought Rachel, Evelyn, and Richard along to every single meeting. I wanted them to feel like high society royalty, completely drunk on the illusion of sudden wealth. At every consultation, Rachel was practically drooling over the most expensive options available. She selected an oceanfront estate with a glass marquee, 5-course plated dinners featuring imported caviar and dry-aged filet mignon, custom crystal chandeliers, and a 12-piece live orchestra. Whenever my parents looked slightly uneasy at the skyrocketing figures, I gave them a reassuring nod. "Don't hold back, Rachel," I said smoothly during a catering tasting. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. The Blackwells expect nothing less than perfection." By the time all the vendor selections were finalized, the total estimate reached a staggering $450,000. It was an astronomical figure, the kind of money that could easily buy a high-end property outright. Evelyn looked at the final master quote with widened eyes, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the bottom line. "Audrey, $450,000? She whispered nervously, leaning across the marble desk so the venue coordinator wouldn't hear. "Are you absolutely sure you can handle a bill this large?" This was the critical moment that required absolute composure. I looked my mother straight in the eye, maintaining a completely relaxed and composed expression. "Mom, relax," I said in a quiet, confident tone. "I told you, I'm taking care of it." But from an administrative and legal standpoint, all contract documents and service agreements must be under Rachel and Dad's names. Vendor guarantees, insurance policies, and liability clauses are strictly bound to the primary host family and the bride. If any service issue arises on the wedding day, you need the legal authority to manage them directly. Rachel immediately jumped at the idea, her vanity blinding her to the financial reality. "Audrey's right, Mom," Rachel insisted, snatching the pen from the desk. "I'm the bride, so my name needs to be on every official contract. We can't have Audrey listed as the main client for my big event." Richard nodded in full agreement, his masculine pride refusing to let a younger daughter take official credit for funding his family's grand spectacle. "That makes total sense," my father added, taking the pen from Rachel to sign as the primary guarantor. "Rachel's name and my signature go on the legal line. Audrey, you just handle the payment transfers on the day of the wedding like we agreed." "Of course," I replied with a subtle, composed smile. "I'll make sure the final payments are settled on the wedding day, after all services are fully delivered. That way, we keep complete leverage over the vendors until the event is finished." The vendor representative collected the signed documents, thrilled to secure a near $500,000 booking. Rachel and my parents walked out of the sales office on cloud 9, completely oblivious to the legal bind they had just walked into. In the eyes of the law, every single contract was binding strictly to Richard and Rachel Walker. They had willingly assumed legal responsibility for a $450,000 obligation, while I remained legally invisible, just an unpaid family member making verbal promises. I carefully saved digital copies of every signed document to a private cloud drive. The trap was set, legally airtight, and completely inescapable. All that was left was to let the big day arrive. The day of the wedding arrived, featuring an impeccably clear sky and a breathtaking oceanfront backdrop. The event venue was stunning, equipped with massive floral arches, crystal chandeliers, and a white grand piano near the main stage. Everything was executing flawlessly, exactly as specified in the $450,000 contracts. I arrived 2 hours early, wearing a simple, elegant dark navy dress, intending to observe the unfolding events. As I walked into the bridal suite, my mother turned around, looking at me with a critical glare. She didn't thank me for organizing the entire production. Instead, she pulled me aside into a corner. "Audrey, we made a minor change," Evelyn said, adjusting her pearl necklace without looking me in the eye. "Rachel wanted her high school friends from the country club as her bridesmaids instead. The color scheme is very specific, and honestly, your navy dress just doesn't fit the aesthetic. You can just watch from the guest seating." I stared at her with complete composure and replied, "That's perfectly fine with me, Mom. I'll take a seat out front." She sighed in relief, pleased that I didn't cause a scene, and immediately turned back to fluffing Rachel's veil. When the ceremony concluded and guests moved into the main ballroom for the reception, I checked the seating chart. My name wasn't listed near the head table or anywhere near the family section. Instead, my parents had placed me at table 22, located in the far back corner right next to the swinging kitchen doors and the service restrooms. Throughout the night, I watched my parents parade Rachel and Jason around the room, bowing toward Jason's wealthy relatives and taking credit for the lavish display. While I sat alone sipping iced water, 2 of Rachel's bridesmaids walked past my table, giggling loudly. "Is that Rachel's sister sitting by the kitchen?" one whispered, not bothering to hide her smirk. "I heard she works a regular desk job. No wonder they hid her back here." I didn't flinch or show a hint of anger. Their shallow insults were meaningless to me. I wasn't there to be celebrated. I was there to witness the final hours before the storm hit. At 8 in the evening, the grand reception reached its absolute peak. The 12-piece live orchestra played softly, while waiters served 5-course dinners and vintage champagne to 300 wealthy guests. Richard stepped up to the stage microphone, giving a grand speech about how proud he was to host such an extravagant celebration for his daughter. "Only the best for my girl," my father boasted into the microphone, raising his crystal glass to the applause of the crowd. He didn't mention my name once, nor did he look toward the back of the room. I checked my watch. It was 8:45. The venue manager, caterer, and production directors were already assembling near the entrance foyer, preparing their final invoice packages for payment settlement. I slowly stood up from my table, smoothed down my dress, and picked up my clutch bag. I took one last look at my family. My mother laughing loudly with Jason's mother, my sister boasting about her ring, and my father playing the generous millionaire host. They were completely intoxicated by their own lies, utterly unaware that their fairy tale was about to turn into a nightmare in less than 15 minutes. I walked quietly past the busy kitchen doors, crossed the grand foyer, and stepped out into the crisp evening air. I walked to my car, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine. Before putting the car in drive, I pulled out my smartphone. I opened my contacts, blocked my father, my mother, and Rachel on every channel, and then permanently deleted their numbers. I turned off my phone, slid it into the glove box, and pulled out onto the highway. As I drove back toward my quiet downtown condominium, I felt a deep, unwavering sense of peace. The show was over for me, but for the Walker family, the bill was finally due. By 9:15 that evening, I was sitting on the balcony of my downtown condominium, drinking a quiet cup of tea and enjoying the peaceful city skyline. Back at the oceanfront estate, however, the lavish fairy tale was collapsing into utter chaos. I didn't need to be in the room to know exactly how it played out. The formal venue incident report and subsequent legal filings told the entire story word for word. The primary venue director, accompanied by the executive chef and the chief floral coordinator, stepped up to the head table, holding a leather folder containing the final master invoice. The total remaining balance stood at $450,000. My father, still holding his champagne glass and riding high on his self-made prestige, smiled grandly at the staff. "Ah, excellent work tonight," Richard said, waving his hand dismissively. "Just go locate my younger daughter, Audrey. She's handling the financial settlements for the evening." The venue director didn't smile back. "Mr. Walker, we checked the main ballroom, the lobby, and the parking facilities. Ms. Walker packed her belongings and departed the property nearly 30 minutes ago." Evelyn's face strained color. "That's impossible," my mother snapped, reaching hastily for her purse. "She probably just went to her car to grab her checkbook." She pulled out her phone and dialed my number. The line didn't ring. It went straight to an automated message stating the call could not be completed. Rachel snatched the phone from her mother's hands and tried texting me frantically, but her screen instantly displayed a delivery failure icon. I had blocked every single one of them across all communication channels. They were completely cut off. Panic quickly rippled through the head table. Richard's arrogant posture instantly crumpled. "Look, this is a minor family miscommunication," my father stammered, his voice rising in volume. "Audrey agreed to pay for this wedding. You need to file these charges to her personal account." The venue's corporate legal manager stepped forward, holding a thick stack of signed paperwork. "Mr. Walker, let me make this crystal clear," she said in a sharp, uncompromising tone. "We have zero financial or legal agreements with Audrey Walker. Your signature and your daughter Rachel's signature are stamped on every legally binding service contract for this $450,000 production. Per Section 12 of your signed agreement, full payment is legally due tonight upon service delivery." Jason Blackwell and his parents walked over to see what was causing the commotion. The venue manager turned directly to Richard and Rachel, her voice echoing across the head table. If a certified cashier's check or direct wire transfer is not finalized immediately, we will press charges for theft of services, freeze the event assets, and hand this file to our legal counsel for immediate civil litigation. Jason's father looked at my parents with absolute disgust. Are you telling me you hosted a $500,000 event without the funds to cover it? He demanded, his face turning red with anger. You brought my family into a fraudulent display? Without waiting for an answer, the Blackwell family walked out of the venue, leaving Rachel sobbing in her wedding dress at the head table. By 8 o'clock Monday morning, formal demand letters demanding $450,000 plus late penalty fees arrived via certified process servers at my father's house. My parents tried reaching out to my corporate office, but my firm's security protocol denied them access to my floor. I had executed my plan flawlessly. I held zero legal liability, signed zero documents, and owed $0. I sat at my desk sipping coffee, perfectly at peace, while my toxic family faced the crushing reality of their own greed. 6 months after the wedding, the quiet machinery of the American legal system finished what my family had started. Civil courts move with slow, relentless precision, and a $450,000 debt isn't something a middle-class household can simply ignore. To avoid immediate criminal prosecution for theft of services and civil fraud, my father was forced to make desperate, catastrophic financial decisions. He didn't have $500,000 sitting in a liquid account. To quiet the venue's aggressive legal team, Richard drained his entire 401k retirement savings, taking massive early withdrawal tax penalties and fees in the process. When that fell drastically short, he took out an emergency, high-interest home equity line of credit, HELOC, against their 4-bedroom suburban house. But borrowing money to cover a luxury party is a short-term Band-Aid on an arterial wound. Within months, the vendor lawsuits resulted in heavy summary judgments, leading to judicial liens being slapped directly onto the property title. Unable to service the astronomical monthly payments on the HELOC alongside the primary mortgage, my father quickly fell behind. 8 months after Rachel's dream wedding, a formal notice of default was taped to their front door. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. The suburban house that my mother had spent 20 years boasting about was put up for public auction on the courthouse steps. The social destruction was just as absolute. The Blackwell family cut ties entirely within 48 hours of the wedding disaster. Jason's father hired a top-tier family lawyer who secured an immediate annulment for Jason on the grounds of financial fraud and misrepresentation. Rachel's illusion of slipping into high society dissolved overnight. 1-bedroom apartment on the far edge of town. For the first time in her life, Rachel had to take a full-time entry-level customer service job just to keep her utilities turned on. Evelyn's reality was equally harsh. After 30 years of living off credit while looking down on working-class people, my mother was forced to take a retail job at a local department store to help stave off further wage garnishments. My parents eventually moved into a small, noisy 2-bedroom apartment near the interstate. Without the luxury facade to sustain them, their marriage fractured completely. The silence of their new life was filled with bitter daily arguments over who was truly to blame for their downfall. A year after the wedding, a handwritten letter arrived at my corporate office, forwarded through my attorney's firm. It was from my mother. The tone was no longer arrogant or demanding. It was desperate, pleading, and frail. She wrote about how much they missed me, how they had learned their lesson, and asked if we could meet for lunch to start fresh as a family. I didn't finish reading it. I fed the letter straight into the office paper shredder, watching it turn into meaningless strips of white confetti. I felt no burning anger, no urge to gloat, and no desire to see them suffer further. I simply felt a deep, untroubled quiet. My parents and sister had spent decades using people as stepping stones, completely convinced that appearances mattered more than integrity. I hadn't destroyed my family. I had simply stepped out of the way, handed them the pen, and let them sign the contract for their own ruin.